Okay, so this is the enemy and pathfinding testing. For this, I'm going to turn the master volume off. We don't need sound effects for the moment. Okay, so first test, which is test number 2 in the enemy and pathfinding testing, is that I've declared there are different types of enemies, and they each have their own attributes and aspects. So, first one, which I've technically for simplicity said is an enemy, is the spike trap. Now, the spike trap attacks any object in its radius when the spikes are up, and the rate, of course, when I say radius, I mean on the spikes themselves. So if I walk over here, of course, I take damage. Now, the first most common the first enemy is the orc, and we can engage in combat now. He'll hit me, we can hit him, and we fight it out. But this is the first enemy. Again, I've said it in the design. He is the slowest. He's sluggish, and but he does a lot more damage. So there are two enemies: the orc and the skeleton. Skeleton I'm going to be showing in a second. Of course, and there you go. So the enemy dies, and the kills will increase by 1. Okay, so I will now be testing the skeleton enemy. I've done the spike and this is all in 2 testing plan, test plan 2. I've done the orc and the spike trap, but now I'm going to simulate what a skeleton's like. Now, some attributes that are specific to the skeleton is that they move slightly faster, they have a slightly larger range of attack, or quite a fair larger range of attack, but they've also got a larger field of view. So you'll notice that they'll come onto me a lot quicker, but they are weaker and they don't do as much damage. So let's just see what that looks like. So of course, he sees me and he starts attacking. So he's ranged. I need to try and get to him. He's knocking me back, but equally, doesn't take that much to kill them. This is going to be test plan 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3. This is what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to do 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3. So I'll just turn off the music here because we don't need any of this. So this is going to be, start with 2.1. 2.1 is the grid gets created, and what that looks like is a large grid of nodes, each with colors, and we're currently in the Unity editor. So if I go and visualize the grid and go to the C, here we go. So this is my grid where red nodes are unwalkable and grey nodes are buffer nodes, which means that the enemy cannot move through them unless getting to the player who's already in them. And then there's the white nodes, which is the walkable nodes. Now, you'll notice that the map looks very inconsistent. This is a slight issue with how Unity deals with colliders and sorting layers and layer masks. So for future development, I plan to fix this bug, make it so that it's very much flush, and everything I want to be red is red, everything I want to be walkable is walkable, etc. But this problem, which it isn't really, has no real negative impact on the gameplay. The enemies still pathfind fine, and there's no real issue because, for instance, this door, it's unwalkable still to the enemy, but when it gets opened, it's refreshed, and the enemy can then walk through it, because parts of the grid get refreshed when the player interacts with that. And as you can see, there are also little corners. That's also an issue, but that's a consistent issue, so clearly it's to do with the collider there. So I will also be testing the grid refresh so that you can get to the idea what's actually happening. So we go to the game. As you saw, this is the 2.1, this is the creating the grid. Now if I open this door. If I go to the C, look, there you go. So, really nice and perfect. The buffers covering the walls. We've got a corridor of walkable nodes. So this would allow the enemy to walk through that. So that works. So now we're going to move on to test plan 2.2, which is a path will form from the enemy node, or its position, I should say, to the last visible player node. What I mean by that is, well, I'll show you. The enemy has a field of view radius which I'll show you here. So he's found me. If I go over here and I pause, now he can't directly go to me because he can't see me, but he'll go to where he last saw me. So this is the one factor of AI, right? So the only reason this looks wrong is because of the knockback. So he was there, so it will recalculate in a second. But look, as you can see, well, I don't know if you can see, but very faint, but this line here shows, for maybe if I turn off the A star and go onto the orc. There you go. So here's the field of view of the orc. Can't look beyond these walls. But as you see, you could see this. Now if we go back and turn back on the visualize grid, this is the last position the enemy saw, because it was down here, saw before I disappeared. So now, if I wait, look, the player gets to the last, the enemy gets to the last position the player was seen, then it recalculates the path. Well, it recalculates the path every frame, but, or every time it needs to update, I should say. But when the enemy reaches the target node and can see the player in the visibility, it's and furthermore, this also includes test number 2.3, which says that the enemy will follow that path along the path smoothly, correctly, and this is good gameplay. I think there's no real faults here. I don't think. Doesn't look like there's any faults. The orc just follows me around the map correctly along the path created using pathfinding. But I'm going to be showing here 2.4 and 2.5. 2.4 is enemy animation, 2.5 is enemy sound effects. So if I just if I go over here, we're looking for enemy animation, enemy sound effects. So the enemy, we're using the orc as an example. Skeleton's very similar. Of course, it's got its own respective animation. But look, so the orc, it's got walking animation, attacking animation. It's got two types of attacks actually. We've seen the first one. That's the first one. You've got it uses that a few times, and then you'll go. So that was the same one. There you go. So there's the extra attack. It's slightly unique. It does more damage, and you can see I'm already very low on health. But look, the enemy has animation, and it also makes sound effects when I take damage when he attacks me. So if I'm going to attack him now, he should make, as you go. It's quite difficult to hear because of the enemy's attack sound, but the orc is taking damage, which is at the same time that the enemy hits. There you go, and there's a sound which sounds like cutting or blood of the enemy dying, and that is test plan 2.5, 2.6, and also 2.7, because the enemy will only attack in their attack range. As I showed, the enemy can miss me. So when I'm walking around and the enemy tries to attack me and I don't take damage, it's because I'm out of his attack range, and therefore he's missed me, which means that the enemy has an attack range. Okay, so this is test plan 2.9. If the enemy cannot find the player after 3 seconds of standing at the end of the path, as I described, the path can only be created, it creates when the player is visible and moves to the last visible position of the player. Then the enemy will return to the starting position and then continue the idle animation. So, as you can see here, in the top of the screen, I don't want him to see me, so I just want to look at what he's doing. He's got an idle animation, so he moves back and forth, patrolling the area. As you can see, it's a repetitive motion. Now, if I really quickly reveal my position to him and then hide, hopefully, what that should do is mean that the enemy can't find me, so I'm going to go. So the enemy found me there. So we'll give it another go. So let's try that again. I think this is it, yes. So the enemy can't find me. What he does is he waits a bit and then he returns back to his initial position and continues the arm movement. So that is test plan 2.9 and 2.10, because 2.10 states that the enemy moves back and forth in an idle movement. So now we can move on to 2.11, which is that the enemy can die and will die when the enemy's health reaches 0. So very quickly, there you go. The enemy dies and he's dropped some loot. And there you go. So that is 2.11 and 2.13, 2.13 I should say, which is that the enemy drops loot upon death. Okay, so we're going to be focusing on sound effect, only the music and the master. So we've got the music playing. Now, this is test plan 2.14 and the last test plan of the enemy and pathfinding. What this says is enemies trigger a music change. So what that means is currently you hear this music. This is a normal music. This is relaxing. Gives a kind of an eerie, mystical vibe, right? When I move into the enemy's field of view, when I become visible to them, you'll notice that the music changes. So, sorry, that's old habits. So, if I just go over here, there you go. And as you can tell, I move closer to the player, to the enemy. Music's changed. A little bit more, there's a bit more of a beat. It's usually more intense when you're fighting and there's loads of sound effects, but look, it's dead, it's gone back, straight back to the normal normal music with a bit of a fade. And that concludes the enemy and pathfinding testing.